Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. The thing that you'll probably see was how I was thrown by it didn't give me a countdown, Ben. So I don't know what happened.
It gave me one. It gave me one.
It didn't give me one. So that's really interesting. And it threw me because I was like, is it started? Is it not? So anybody that's listening that didn't see the countdown, I didn't either. So welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It is a pleasure and an honour to have you with us. Hopefully you will be excited for the next half an hour, 40 minutes, hour of the rabbit hole that will be the conversation with the wonderful Nici Foote. Nici, Ben, we're not going to talk about how are you and everything else. We're going to avoid it like we do because that's where we'll lose everybody and we'll have me, you, your mum and everybody else listening rather than the people we want. So Nici, for those people that don't know you, we were just talking before we went live, how long we've actually known each other, how we met and my lack of memory. And also, so do you want to kind of give us a bit of a short bio synopsis of who you are and your journey into education, but also the education technology and the work that you currently do now?
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. So I'm Nici Foote. I have been an educator. I think this is about my 26th-ish year. I started in the education sector pretty early on, actually. I went to university straight away, really, and then decided I didn't want to do that, and then left and went straight into education. So by the age of 21, I was all qualified up, and I've just been in it ever since. I had a very interesting school career in that I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD when I was 10 years old. And then, dyslexia and dyscalculia when I was 10, and then ADHD and an auditory processing disorder when I was 20 at university. And it didn't really, I think it's taken me till I'm in my 50s to really understand the impact of that on my life. I came out at 17 of school. I had 2 A-levels, kind of a good set of GCSEs, but had been that student throughout my career in education up until that point of being just the thick one in the classroom. You know, the card, the one who's friends with everyone, can have a good old laugh. But actually, at 17 years old, I looked around and I went, I'm a failure already. Everyone's going to university. Everyone's doing this. I didn't get accepted to a university at all, actually. I got rejected from every offer. I had to go through the back door through clearing. And I think that for me was a real struggle. It left me with such inferiority complex. I really struggled with my confidence all the way through my 20s and 30s. And it wasn't until I had my own children, who are also on the ND spectrum, that I realized that I needed to work out really who I was and own that journey. And that's really where I am today. The last 17 years I've spent internationally. So I worked in the Caribbean, really literally Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. If anyone's been there, it's amazing. I've also then moved to Singapore. I've been in Bangkok, I've been in Beijing, and I came back to the UK post-COVID about 3 years ago and have been working in the edtech companies ever since.
You're muted, Ben.
Yeah.
Just so you know, because I've done that as well. If you need to go and let him in, because that's not a problem.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Wait, if you go and do that, and then I can cut this bit on the podcast.
Okay, all right.
I was like,
Yeah, you've got echo there, Steve.
it came through from Nicci's as if when she's taking the headphones out, that's all of a sudden it just boomed. So I've muted her. So yeah, all good. I was like, yeah, I could hear the banging. I was like, is that my door? Is that your door? Yeah. I'm not ready for those days.
You're on mute. You're on. Oh,
Hello.
sorry. It's
Are
all
you
right.
there?
Sorry.
Yeah, we're good.
Yes.
It was my next door neighbour telling me my lights were on. I got, oh God, that's bloody no. She's like
That's
banging
cool.
on the door.
That's cool. I can segue it in. So it was an actual step there as well. So,
Yeah.
so you've had a varied space. Caribbean's are quite an interesting one. Maybe that'll come up in another conversation. But your experience of education was an interesting one for yourself. Interesting is probably a nice, polite way to put it, if you've had that difficulty there. And then obviously coming into education, you acknowledge that there's barriers for other people. And I know that has been a big passion of yours for a long time. Before we get into talking about the work that you do currently, I think it's worth just shouting out that if anybody's been on the Edufuturists website, you'll have seen that there is a few reviews of some of the things we do. And one that's been with us right from the beginning is, or very, very early on, because obviously Nici has been a long time subscriber, so thank you for being part of that. But she wrote this about the Edufuturist newsletter, which I think is pretty cool. And it's probably the thing that I tell people the most if anybody says, well, what do you do with Edufuturist? This is what people say about our newsletter. And Nici said, I don't read newsletters often. Thank you. Most people don't. But this is a joy. Authentic, zero bullshit, and digs deep. And which we are super grateful that you said that all that time ago. Hope you still believe that as well.
Oh, I absolutely do. Yeah. I love, because there is so much bullshit in what we do. There is so much bollocks turning around. I'm not sure if I can swear, but basically we see it all the time.
100% you can. 100% you can.
Oh, thank God for that. There's so much out there in the press. I mean, today we've had The Guardian waffling on about ADHD. We've got LBC, the Daily Mail, Trump, the politicians. Everyone's telling something about it. And we're really trying to navigate the wood from the trees. And we really need to have these really honest, strong conversations where we have dialogue, where we kind of like are against each other in some way and are like pushing away and through and kind of navigating really what is important. So thank you.
100%. And I think what you're doing is doing that as well. So we're grateful that we're on a team, and we're not always in the same spaces doing all the same stuff. But yeah, we're grateful for that. Steve, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say in terms of the website and the work that you're doing in terms of the unbarrier.me, I suppose. The slogan it has is, in our world, we bring the joy. What does that even mean then in terms of, that's a brilliant slogan. I've worked in education long enough, and many organisations that have straplines and visions and statements. And generally in education, it's like, well, you probably could have written that. We want to be part of the community. We want to do. What does yours mean beyond the slogan? What does the work actually entail? And how do we, in this world of all of the stuff that we've just said just on ADHD, magnify that for everything that anybody ever disagrees with now? How do we bring joy? And what is the work that you're actually doing in Nici?
I think the work that I really want to do, as I said already, it took me a long time to really work out who the authentic Nici was, and to be able to step into a world as Nici. I'm the one that walks into the room and I'm saying the little things that kind of might not be right to say in that meeting, or in calling things out. My brain works at very different speed to my mouth, and bringing that joy into the classroom. I have the absolute pleasure of working in the classrooms a lot with teachers. And I really, really believe bringing the joy into learning is so vital. I listened to a podcast recently about SEND, and one of the things that they were saying is that we don't want to talk about fun, play, and joy because it's not relevant in this conversation. And I absolutely disagree with that. I think if we don't bring the joy in, if we don't get our students learning for fun and finding their passions and building those vulnerable, trust-based relationships in the classroom, we are going to miss the plot. We're going to miss the point because we haven't got them where we need them to be. Making those relationships joyful, making learning joyful is actually that design process that we need to start with.
And do you know what's really interesting there is that I hope it wasn't one of the podcasts we had recently when you heard some of that kind of stuff. Because,
no, it's a totally different one, don't worry.
But because that came up in a conversation about whether learning should be fun, whether school should be fun, whether people should enjoy it. In fact, one of our questions that will come up, I'm giving you a bit of a thing. We ask people about if schools would judge like restaurants by how much children enjoy the experience.
I love that question.
What would change? And somebody went, well, nothing should change because it's not about whether they enjoy it. And I'm like, what? The whole word enjoy means is to bring in the joy and enjoy that whole conversation around. I've had enough of trying to do things because somebody's told me I've got to do them, and the compliance thing and being controlled and told you must do this, you must have this done, this is the way to do it. I just think I just want to enjoy what I'm doing. And if I enjoy what I'm doing and I am with people that are also enjoying what they're doing, and if they're in a struggling place, well, we'll enjoy helping them come out of that and all the bits that go with it. Not everybody can have joy all the time, but I'm led back to something that I learned a long time ago. I used to be an RE teacher, as you know, and I read a book many, many moons ago by the great C.S. Lewis. Everybody remembers C.S. Lewis as he wrote The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Opening my wardrobe.
Yeah, amazing like series for kids and whatnot. But he wrote some other great books, and one of them was called Surprised by Joy. And what people don't realise is that it gets me emotional when I think about it, because it changed me when I thought about Joy, is that Joy was his wife who was dying of cancer, and he wrote the book Surprised by Joy. And he talked about how joy can still happen even in the toughest of times. And actually, joy is a choice. It's not about happiness. It's not about feeling the buzz all the time. It's about and so when I saw that on what you were doing in Our World, Bring the Joy, it really resonated, because I thought it doesn't have to everything be fixed. We're not, and especially when you're doing about barriers and people's diagnoses and troubles and what, doesn't mean that everything's got to be fixed and happy and we've got to pretend everything's right. It's about enjoying that and realizing that we can find joy even in suffering. We can find joy even in difficulty. We can find joy in barriers. Look at me getting all deep and emotional early on in a podcast, but I think it's important that
I think it's also about that mess. Life is messy. Relationships are messy. And I really believe that learning needs to be messy. The best classrooms that I've been into is where the learning process for all of the students is different, that the students are in there and they are creating a mess, whether that's a physical mess or a mental mess or cognitive mess. It doesn't matter. That mess is part of the process. It's understanding that through that mess, we can find our space. We can find that structure in where we need to go and the joy that comes from that. I mean, if you look at us three, all of us are working, doing our own businesses in a way. And I think when I've got to where I am now, everything I try and do is joyful. It might be really hard. And I have a lot of roadblocks to go through in order to make this business work so that I can put something other than baked beans on the table. But I'm choosing the projects that are bringing me joy. I'm choosing the projects that I am passionate about, where it is deeply connected to my skills and myself. And I think that when we look at learning, yes, we need to look at the curriculum. Yes, we need to be really developing our students' key skills and understandings in order to go forward in this world. But so that what I really think is that mess along the way, that joyful approach to learning really needs to be central to that.
Yeah, I think it's just, it covers so much. And I think it was that terminology by traditionalists. I don't want to say traditionalists, because traditionalists actually is traditional education. Those people that wanted to do it in a particular way, and it was all about quietness of children and compliance. Yeah. But they talked about edutainment, I think was the phraseology that used. And they said, we need to step away from edutainment and joy of learning and fun and everything else. And I was like, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Let's just do exactly as we say, and let's see where it gets to in any element of life. If you think about transactional analysis, the terminology in the conversations I offer down half is rebellious children compared to compliant children. And ultimately, just because they sit there, they nod their heads, and we think that they're engaged and they're following along with us, doesn't mean that actually we're going to win them all and they're not going to leave the classroom, go, I'm never going to remember that, and also just say, I hate this experience, I dislike this experience, I don't want to do it anymore. We turn off.
I don't see the point in it as well.
Yeah, we throw water on the fire that is probably lit from nursery into early years often, and we throw the water on that fire and we dampen it on a regular basis just to get them compliant, to get them ready for an exam. And I just think it's absolutely bonkers.
Well, one of the things, so my background, which I didn't explain earlier actually, was my background's in early years. So I started off in primary education, but very quickly realised I really wanted to be in early years. So I've spent a lot of my career working with children from the age of 2 all the way up to reception and year 3. But I love that space because when you look at the early years curriculum and all those developmental steps, we are looking really, really working out what that next key step is for that student. We can become really great at identifying what that next key step is. And all of those different parts of the early years curriculum is really important. Play, following the child, oracy, looking at voice and talk. That's really, I think, and we kind of forget that when they get older. We get to a point where we're like, right, now let's just put them in a seat and let them sit there for 30, 40 minutes without moving.
You can see me, if anybody's watching, you can see me getting all animated. You can see me nodding and laughing. Because if we had £1 for the amount of people we have conversations with say that we need more education that's more early years style, player-based learning. We talked to Sophie Pickles, we talked to the guys around STEM, we talked to a lot of the people who talk in the tech space, saying it's about playing, it's about finding the Lego conversations. We had the brilliant privilege in 2025 of interviewing Andrew Slowinski at BET, who is the super senior at Lego Education. It's about playing. It's like actually some of the things that happen when you're doing that kind of fine motor skills and when you're playing with things, and even doing Lego and talking, Lego therapy, the conversation that goes with that, and all the other bits that go with it are tied to the idea, well, playing. And interestingly, I've not done this yet. My favourite film, Steve, can you remember what my favourite film is? Do you know what it is?
From Roger Rabbit, was it, Ben?
No, it's not. It's my favourite film, and I say it quite a lot, is The Lion King. Okay.
Nice.
Best film, it's my favourite film of all time. Like, people laugh at me for saying it. But for Christmas, my kids and my wife bought me a Lego Lion King because they know I love Lego and they know I love the Lion King.
That's Duplo. That's Duplo.
It's not
that's Duplo.
Yeah, I did struggle. The fingers were a little bit like, look at these fat fingers. Yeah. But the reason why I say it is because two things. One is that on Christmas Day, when the busyness of things happened, I said to my wife, we had a bit of time before we went out for a meal, I was like, are you all right if I go and do my Lego? And she was like, go for your life. Because she knew that I was like, maybe there's the ND stuff that's in that as well. But the principle I'm saying here is that you talked about early years, you talked about play, and then we put people in roles and we say that here's a bespoke curriculum, you've got a non-bespoke curriculum you've got to follow. I have a conversation with both my daughters who are 11 and 15. Every day I talk to them about school. Stopped asking them, have you had a good day? Because I don't get the right answer. I've started asking them, what have you learned today? Or is there anything that stands out? Or what stands out from today? Or have you enjoyed it? Like those kind of things. There's never a time when they come home, or rarely a time when they come home and they're like, wow, we're doing this and we're doing that.
Keep going.
15-year-old who wants to be a doctor, which is just blows my mind. And we're driving in a car. I said, what are your lessons today? And she says, I've got double chemistry, biology, Spanish, and physics. And I was like, wow, that's full on. She went, yeah, a lot of science that. I went, you said you want to be a doctor? Like literally your life is going to be this. Are you sure? But like, there's no like, oh yeah, it's well good because we're doing this in biology or we're doing this in physics or I've got this. But you watch little kids, it was just like, everything's exciting, isn't it? Everything's exciting.
Absolutely. I remember, so I was teaching a year 4 classroom about 5 years ago in China, and I was lucky enough to have early years gave me a massive box of blocks. You know, those big wooden blocks that you have in early years, and a huge box of Lego. So I took them over and I put them in my classroom. Every morning, those kids came in, they'd come in early, they would set the blocks up, they were building contraptions, they were building them across the class. Half the classroom you couldn't move in because you had to step over all their different structures. But these blocks became part and parcel of everything that we did. They would get them out to map out their stories. We were doing something in RE where we were looking at mosques, and they would get the blocks out to redesign the mosque and then post-it notes to show the different parts of the mosque. This part of play is so vital.
I was on mute and I just realised. I think it's thinking about some things are difficult. Some things people will enjoy, and it's finding a bit of, some bits people will find fun. Some people will dislike. It's finding a happy medium. You're not going to like everything. You're not going to find fun in everything, but you can try and take the joy, as Ben said. Joy is different to fun, but also how we can move it forward and then consider what bits do you know and why are you not finding that as enjoyable as something else? Is it the way it's been delivered? Is it the content? Because ultimately some subjects and some things like hobbies, some people will have dislikes and likes in life. That's just it. But some of those things I don't find it a hobby, the school run. Do I find joy in it at times? Yes, I do. Do I always find it fun? No, I don't. Do I dislike it at times? Elements of it, absolutely. But it's also then clarifying to young people, some things you've just got to do. That's just part of life. But you can find fun and structures in those things. And what bits do you enjoy? I love brushing my daughter's hair. I love getting them into the car I don't know why. I just love that element on the morning. I do not like them getting out of the car. And I do not like the walk up to school and the chaos of the cars and everything else. But absolutely thinking, well, what bit is it that triggers me? What bit's it just? And I think that's just learning and just life in general. And we just teach them and say, well, even if you just completely don't ever want to do it, we'll focus down on that. And I always link it to PE in schools as well, because PE and some rounder subjects, when it gets to those heavy years, as we will classify or people classify them, and somebody might need more support in maths, we take away all the enjoyment and all the bits often that children will want to do and focus on, the bits that they will carry through for the rest of their life, and focus on something that they don't want to, just to slightly get a better grade. I'm like,
I think a lot of these structures that we put in place for students in the classroom, when we're taking them out, with withdrawing them from subjects to boost their maths or their phonics or their literacy, what we're doing is we're really focusing on the structures that we need in our schools in order to keep everything sane. So the timetabling, the bits and pieces where you've got teachers, who our teachers are, where our TAs are, it's really strict. And I understand that. I'm not saying that we really need that. I don't have a solution to that, to be honest. But timetables, when I was working in China, I got absolute pleasure working with a great school called the Western Academy of Beijing. And they have really worked hard at looking at how belonging can really change the scope of their school. So they basically, belonging for them became something really focusing on personalising learning, not just for their student community, for everyone. It became something that they really looked at to support their parent and guardian community, their teaching community. Every single part of that community got to look at belonging and personalisation of their day, of their life at that school. And that's really what built up a really amazing community. For me, I would say it was one of the most incredible 2 years of my life. It's a really tricky place to live in Beijing. The language is really difficult. There is nothing in English. But I got to be part of this community that really welcomes you into it. And they have really looked at every one of those structures. They've gone, right, how do we look at timetabling? What is the barrier to allowing our students to navigate personalization of learning? What about our standardized assessments? What do our students need when we look at standardized assessments? Some of our students aren't going to get to this level of standardized assessments, and that actually is okay for them. Some of them need a different pathway. And what pathways can we put in place in order to support those students and that cohort of the community?
And this is really interesting, because I've just been listening to where you just said about, well, you were in China and nothing was in English and you loved it because you were welcomed but that's, my mind just went into, if you think about massive chunk of our children, it could be like they're learning in Chinese in our English schools. You go into our English schools and they're expected to do this, and they are not getting it. They've no idea what a frontal adverbial is. And do they really need to fucking know?
I don't know what a frontal adverbial
is. It's like, why? Like, I'm not disparaging it. I love words. I'm literate, but I understand, like, why? And interestingly, we had a conversation with somebody on the podcast recently, and the go-to that most people have is about Pythagoras' theorem. Like, what is the point in Pythagoras' theorem? Nobody ever uses it. And then he went, well, actually, my son's a roofer, and he was explaining to his 15-year-old, his other son, that where he uses Pythagoras every day. Imagine, and as I said, imagine what it would be like if schools decided to go, rather than tell us this Chinese Pythagoras' theorem that's just out there, no context, we say, well, actually, if you're in roofing and if you're in landscaping or if you're in architecture, if you're in whatever else, this is what it means. And you would turn on a massive chunk of learners, particularly boys in that space, who might have had a disconnect from it. That idea of learning in more schools being like your experience of being in Beijing, of like going, well, I've got to find a way. And so I need a translate option, or I need somebody to help me to get to that point. I've just got to try and work out what the pictures mean and whether that makes that is it, isn't it? And you're obviously, a lot of the work that you're doing in the inclusion space is and that belonging inclusion stuff. And I know it's not just about is there an app for helping somebody with dyslexia. They're great, and we love teams like Everway and others that do incredible work to create technology to support in that adaptive way. And we're really grateful that they've partnered with us as Edufuturists for a long time on whatnot. This actually comes back down to something I think I've heard you speak about, and I've seen you write about, and I've seen in lots of space, and I've learnt a passion around it because I've ended up presenting around it in myself. Is this idea about UDL and universal design for learning, and this idea that concept of, in fact, actually, you tell us about why that matters, and then maybe we can dig into it about the way that you plan being UDL, because it's just a totally different way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, so UDL, Universal Design for Learning, for me is a game changer in really meeting the needs of and leveling the playing field in our classrooms so that all students have an access point to what we're learning in the classroom. Basically, for me, it's all about multimodal learning. Let's look at how we can give students a multiple means of representation. We want students to be writing in their books. We love it. I love it. I'm 47 and I have my book here. Okay. We need that traditional kinesthetic writing, drawing, mapping out of learning, but we also need them to be able to access learning in different ways, whether that's listening to a podcast or listening to an audio note, whether that's watching a video and being able to pause it, write, document, and then move forward. Whether it's giving them an opportunity to be able to document all of their thinking and then map it out and then move it around physically. Post-it notes are great for this. Online apps like Freeform is one of my favorites, where you can put brain dump, put everything down and then reorganize it over time. We really need to be looking at how UDL processes can really support our students so that they can be able to navigate the really rich concepts that we have and be able to make those deeper connections throughout the lesson and beyond that lesson. So over time, they're coming back and they're mapping out and making much bigger connections.
I think it's the connectivity and the context of learning, which is really, really key. Because Ben talked about, like in terms of Pythagoras and some things that we might need to learn. And then there's connectivity in regards to different synergies of learning and different ways that people want to learn. We don't allow breaks. We don't allow consideration and different pace and structure in learning at all. Like, and people then say, personalised learning, and differentiation. I can remember because differentiation became personalised. Differentiation was so strong for such a long period of time that people say, no, absolutely not. How could you do that? And also, but I'm like, all differentiation to me just meant consideration of aspects
Absolutely.
of others in the learning. And we spend an awful amount of time creating structures and learning and a lot in education of what we'd want to do. I remember I took a library structure through some changes. And I remember spending a lot of time with a lot of adults just saying, I think you're getting confused. And they were saying, why? And I was like, because it isn't about you. And they're going, but I love books and I do this. And I was like, brilliant. So do I. But it's not about you. And I remember at every level of the organization having to have those conversations and saying, I have brought learners into this space that want to learn outside of the classroom. And I created the brand I Learn any place, anytime, anywhere was a Martini model that I kind of and all of those kind of things, and saying, right, you are thinking about how you learn. Brilliant. But we haven't, and that's fine, because some learners will still want to learn the way that you want to learn. But the spaces that I see in front of me and what learners are telling me is that they don't have the opportunity to learn in different ways. They can come pick up a book and they can sit there quietly and they can't talk to anybody else. That's all they can do. What about everybody else? You are targeting a market that you step into, that you're comfortable with, that some learners might do, like a sixth form learner or a high achiever in terms of some of those. Not all, but some. I'm categorising. But I just think, and I spent an awful amount of time going, no. And people say, what about the beanbag? It wasn't beanbags for all. It was about opportunity and options, and that people could make those choices and had a choice to make, not being directed and dictated to all the time. And that's what I see in terms of this UDL and what you've just talked about.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you've just said actually is that I go into classrooms and I see very much, and I think it's a post-COVID thing where during COVID, we had to showcase information and knowledge and guide our students online through a PowerPoint. PowerPoint has become the tool of choice for sharing information in our classrooms. But to be honest, for me, that actually is a structure that has become something that's really important for teachers in order for them to feel safe, that they're covering the content, that they're scaffolding and they're going through the processes and the steps and they're meeting those steps and they have done all the bits that they need to do, basically. That design is okay because it's in a PowerPoint and I can work through it from beginning to end. But the problem with learning is we don't go from beginning to end in one pathway. All of those students in the classroom will go on multiple tangents and off on different directions, depending on how they feel on the day, depending on whether they've had breakfast, depending on what their parents felt about learning or what they've had in the playground, blah, blah, blah. So UDL, looking at this whole multiple means, there's 3 different parts of it, but multiple means of engagement. How are we going to engage with the learning? Having our teachers decide that we're having a PowerPoint and structuring learning in that way, for me, is safety, but also I really feel that teachers are teaching the way that their brain is safe, the way their brain is thinking. So they are structuring that lesson because that's how they feel they would like to be receiving that information. But they're not actually that empathy, that peace and understanding. And it's not the fault of teachers. I think that we have a massive gap in our teacher learning process, which is what is inclusion? What is neurodivergence? What is all of these other things that go with it? What's the language around that? What does it mean for those learners? What does it mean what do they need in order to be really comfortable and confident in order to accept and own their own learning?
And that ownership of learning is really something that lands in our wheelhouse, because obviously you'll know that we've been in the throes of the editing for the book, Pick and Mix education book, and the whole part of that is about ownership and about parents having a little bit more ownership and autonomy about choice in schools, but also young people should have ownership or we should develop ownership. We say a lot, and we'll, by the time this airs, we'll have spoken about this multiple times about agency with guardrails. We say it all the time. We're not saying, here's the keys to a Ferrari, or tell you what, go and ride that racing bike in the middle of wherever else. We're not saying do that. We're saying step by step by step. We're saying that with your teenage students or your preteen young people, maybe you need to have a conversation with them about screen time. Not say, okay, you're banned from it, or you've only got an hour a day and you've dictated that to them. Why not have a conversation with them? Why not have a conversation with them about their algorithm and what they're seeing? Or why not talk to them about when to use ChatGPT or when not to use it, rather than making rules and everything's about compliance? And we've said a few times, we think the compliance thing and the control thing is about scale. And you've said that as well. What's easiest for timetables, what's easiest for the most amount of students. And so therefore we create this, what we think is the average, the one size fits all bell curve, and realize that it doesn't really fit very many. And Steve, I don't know how many times we've had the conversation that we've probably thrived despite school rather than because of school.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily that I blame I had a brilliant school. I was just a compliant kid. I know you won't think it now, but I was a compliant kid most of the time because my mum and dad were quite strict and school was quite strict, and I didn't like upsetting anybody. So if you think about what that means in terms of our kids and the learners that you're working, especially with learners with additional needs, whatever they look like. By the way, I know we'll be on the same page of this as well. We don't like the phrase special needs. We don't even like the phrase additionalist because everybody's got needs, and like some of them are identified needs, and everybody's got barriers. Some barriers are about reading. Some barriers are about the color of a screen. Some barriers are about I can't sit still. Some barriers it could be anything, couldn't it? And it's about understanding that we all have barriers to that, and we probably need to navigate into that. And so the idea about multiple modes of engagement or this multimodal learning, as well as representation that sits into that space. You're saying about that being an UDL is about doing that from the beginning as opposed to try and do it as a bolt-on, isn't it? And
yes, that design challenge. Let's design our lessons so that I don't like the word lessons, but let's design our experiences for our students in a way where they can engage with the learning in multiple different representations. Let's give them different modes. So let's give them a PDF. Let's give them snippets of information. Let's give them the slides that we have on the screen so that they can actually go through them back and forth in their own time and doodle on them and annotate them. But also, let's give our students different ways of expressing their learning. So we're not just writing in the books. We might be looking at podcasts. For me, podcast is an amazing opportunity in the classroom that I think is absolutely untapped completely, not only for getting students to engage with concepts, but also getting them to express them as well, getting them to write about something that they find really, really interesting and compiling that learning collaboratively with a group.
Well, I don't want to of quick fire questions, but we often ask, why is it that people won't step into it? Why is it that we don't use these other modes of media? Is it because people disagree and that's fine that they don't, or is it, this goes back to this, we don't have time to do it? Why is it, do we feel that people then stay? Well, and is it the fact that people run the same lessons, not because they're lazy, because there's so much to do in education that actually there is so little time spent on the learning and the planning of learning and the experience within the classroom, rather than the lesson plan itself and the marking and the assessment of the learning and everything else that comes with it. What is the reason why we don't follow UDL and create better experiences, more considered experiences for learning?
Well, first of all, I think UDL isn't taught explicitly in teacher training. It's not there in professional development. It's not there in schools at the moment, really. I know it is there in other countries. Asia, it's a big one. It's big in Europe and it's a massive in America. It's been there for quite a long time. I think we're quite late to the party on it, really. But I would say everything you've just said, time. You could go back to why are we teachers not doing this? Number one, time. They don't get given enough time to plan. And when they're planning in silo. We need collaborative planning. We need teachers in groups. We need that RE, or in fact, imagine that design teacher who's looking at building, maths teacher together, Pythagoras theorem. We're going to save ourselves time in the classroom because we've got two teachers really, really embedding the same knowledge. Our students are going to find that deeper real world impact just by getting those two teachers together to plan a unit. So for me, that bit would be, I would give teachers more time to plan collaboratively and not just in the same year group. Let's look at other things. It was really interesting in Beijing. One of the other things we did was we got early years to plan with, say, year 5 or 6. And then, or even at the secondary school and early years got together, not for consistently, but they got together once a year in order to just look at a unit and how can we work through this unit in a different way? What can we learn from each other? For me, that was actually design and early years got together. Design created a product for the early. It was a digital storybook or an actual physical storybook for the students. They used the students, they interviewed them, they got that whole empathy piece. It was incredible learning process. But I'd also say time. Look at our structures in our classrooms. We have to, because of the way we're set up. I went into a secondary school recently and I was doing a demo lesson and I'm going to say absolutely flopped because they have 35 minutes from the minute those students walk in the door to the minute they walk out of the door. And if you've got technology that is not working, that hasn't got all its ducks in a row, that technology is not going to work for every student in that classroom at that moment. And you are going to be having to problem solve. So the teachers actually are not using the technology that could support them. What they're doing is they are just focusing on what they need to focus to get through 35 minutes of lesson content. And then they know they've met their need. Students, though, when you look at us, I don't know about you guys, but when I am doing all of my best work, 35 minutes is not enough. I need to go down a rabbit hole. And not all children do this. So my partner, for instance, financial advisor, very structured in his thinking, very different to me. And he likes He can do 35 minutes of work, go get a coffee, come sit down and still pick up that same train of thought. That is never going to happen for me. I need to sit there for 3 hours. So when we're looking at time, I'm not suggesting teachers have 3 hours in the classroom with their kids non-stop without a break, because that's ridiculous. But what I am saying is 35 minutes when you get the students in and you're engaging and you're explaining the learning and you're making connections and you're giving them a really, I would say, like a menu of options in order for them to engage and represent and express themselves. For me, time is a real barrier.
Time is a barrier, and from a teaching perspective, it's a barrier. For students, it's a barrier. For parents, it's a barrier. And it's almost like we think that time has to be linear as well. So it has to be, okay, well, by the time you are 11, you must be able to do this. By the time you're 16, you must be able to do this. And it's because we have year groups, because we have bells, because we have finish points of school. It's really interesting. I read some research the other day that talked about reading, and that everybody in the UK, everybody is learning to read, and we should be picking up books. And 4 and 5, they should be like, if they're not reading yet, you're worried that they're not behind, and they're not making expected progress and all the other bit. And then some of the most successful countries in the world don't even pick up a book until they're 7 or 8, and they are reading, but they're not picking up books to, like, as if it's like a chuck. Well, and you wonder why the love of reading disappears when you've got to complete a reading book. And I wrote a piece, and I know that a few people, it resonated with that piece about homework being gaslighting, and it caused loads and loads of problems, because some people are like, we need homework, it's important, all the research that you're suggesting. But the argument is that if you think about how homework works for most families, it's a chore on the parents, because you're having to help them do that, and it's a battle because the kids have got no interest in doing it. They're doing it because they have to, compliance thing. But if you get reading in a space where they're reading for the joy of it, not because they've got to complete that reading planner. I used to have to fill in how many pages is read every night.
Yeah, I know. Biff and Chip. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
There's Chip and Kipper, yeah.
Yeah.
What were the dog called?
I think that was Kipper, wasn't it? Or maybe
no,
not.
Kipper was a little kid. I don't know. It'll come to us. Somebody will be saying it in a comment somewhere. It's this, it's this.
Yeah. I think my brain's gone on, had a little fart moment, but I think that all the research says homework is only beneficial if the student chooses to do it, if they take ownership over it and they action it themselves, but also if it is supported by an active guardian or parent who is engaged in the process.
And we're going to create more barriers, aren't we, into that space if we're not careful, because are we going to create bigger gaps with students who haven't got that active parenting at home or guardianship at home?
Absolutely.
And the answer is a resounding yes, and we go into that space. Steve, I think we've hit that time, haven't we, to go and to get in our favourite part of the thing, because it always makes people squirm. But it sounds like that we've got a listener who may well have already been thinking about what the question there. I think they might know. We haven't mixed them up for a bit, so you're lucky.
Oh, good.
I actually think you might be the last of these questions, so we're going to mix them up. So.
I've said that for about 7 weeks, but because we keep getting around to rewriting the next one. But you are definitely the last one, because me and Ben are together next week, so it gives us more opportunity to do those bits and to pick apart different bits and go, right, should we do this now? Should we do this bit? I'll go first, and Ben will come in, and then I'll do the last one. So, if schools were judged like restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what would change overnight?
I did. I had a really good think about this one before, because I've commented on it. I think I was thinking about this. To give me the question again. If schools were judged like
restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what would change overnight?
Yeah, menu. For me, it would be a menu.
Love it. That's nice and quick. Yeah, nice and quick. So what is the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
The myth, I think that for me, it's about that students can't do it. It's about being thick, or it's the language that's involved with what's the word where you can't any limiting language, like they're in the lower ability. I can't stand it. lower ability. If I could scratch anything, it'd be that. That for me is the myth that we need to get rid of.
If a 10-year-old asked you why they have to go to school, what would you actually say?
I've had this question so many times. And my 10-year-olds, well, they're not 10 anymore, but even then I would say actually it's about meeting your friends, and it's about having fun, and it's about your social engagements and just, having that community around you.
Love it. I think that might be mine. I think that might be my little tick where I say love it quite a lot. But I do, I think menus, limiting abilities, and then this idea of there is reasons, but it's not the kind of reasons that you think I'm going to say as a parent. It's for chances and all the other bits that go with it. We are really grateful that you've given us a time. We're grateful that you've been a supporter of what we do. And I'm going to be really frank, and this might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but we really value the kind of work that you do, where it's unseen and not everybody gets to shout about what you're doing and whatnot. But if you are listening to this or watching this and haven't checked out the work that Nici's done, or haven't been over to unbarrier.me, we'll put the link in the show notes.
Thank you.
You absolutely should. If you are a trust that needs support around this kind of stuff, if you're a school or a college or international, Nici is right at the cutting edge of it. And when we get a recommendation for a guest that then as a synergy, and this is for those people who are listening and got to this point, Paddy from Everywhere said to us, "Why have you not interviewed Nici yet?" And I was like, "Oh man, we should have done that ages ago." And Paddy's put a recommendation in. We've managed to make it happen around crazy schedules, but the work that you're doing is incredible, and we're very, very grateful for all that you are doing to support those that are the most vulnerable. And we didn't get into the conversation about our own diagnoses and our own challenges and all bits that go with it, but that's obviously for part 2 in a conversation of a podcast. But Nici, thanks for joining us on the podcast, and keep doing what you're doing. We champion you, and we're grateful for what you do.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Paddy.
Cheers, Paddy.
We love you, Paddy.